Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're rediving deep into the career of a man who has shaped global finance for over a decade, Mark Carney. You've probably heard his name. He's been the governor of two central banks, the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England. He's advised prime ministers and presidents, and now he's a major force in the world of climate finance. He's often presented as a steady hand, a financial superstar, the man who steered economies through crisis. But is that the whole story? Today, we're going to peel back the layers and look at some of the more controversial aspects of Mark Carney. As career, the decisions and connections that Dante always make the headlines. This isn't about conspiracies. It's about connecting the dots in a career that has had a massive impact on all our lives. Let's start where Carney first made his name, Goldman Sachs. Before he was a public servant, he spent 13 years at the investment banking giant. He was there during some of the firm's most notorious moments, including its involvement in the Russian financial crisis of 1998. Carney's role was to help Russia navigate its debt, and when the country defaulted, Goldman Sachs, like many others, faced huge losses. While Carney was never personally accused of wrongdoing, his time at Goldman Sachs placed him at the heart of a system that many feel prioritizes profit above all else. This experience undeniably shaped his understanding of the global financial machine, giving him an insider's perspective that would define his later career. After leaving Goldman Sachs, Carney entered public service, eventually becoming the governor of the Bank of Canada in 2008. His tenure started just as the global financial crisis was exploding. Canada's banking system was praised for its resilience, and Carney was hailed as a hero for keeping the country relatively stable. He became known as the man who saw the crisis coming. Household debt in Canada skyrocketed to become one of the highest in the developed world. The very stability he was praised for may have come at the cost of creating a ticking time bomb of personal debt that still affects Canadians today. In 2013, Carney made a historic move, becoming the first non-Briton to be appointed governor of the Bank of England in its 300-year history. He arrived in London as a financial celebrity, but his time in the UK was anything but smooth. One of his first major policies was forward guidance, where he essentially told the public that interest rates would unrise until unemployment fell below a certain level. The goal was to give businesses and households certainty. But the plan quickly unraveled. Unemployment fell much faster than expected, but the bank didn't raise rates, making the guidance look unreliable. This led to accusations that Carney was being overly political, trying to manage public perception rather than just the economy. He was dubbed the unreliable boyfriend by one British MP for sending mixed signals to the market. Then came Brexit. The Bank of England, under Carney's leadership, issued stark warnings about the economic consequences of a vote to leave the European Union. He warned of a potential recession, a sharp drop in the pound, and rising unemployment. When the UK voted to leave, many of these predictions didn't materialize in the short term. This led to fierce criticism from Brexit supporters, who accused Carney of Project Fear, deliberately trying to scare voters into remaining in the EU. They argued he had overstepped his role as an impartial central banker and had acted as a political player. Defenders say he was simply doing his job, outlining potential risks. But the controversy damaged the bank's reputation for neutrality and left a lasting impression that Carney was an active participant in the political fray, not just an observer. Now, let's talk about his post-central bank career. Mark Carney has pivoted to become one of the world's most prominent advocates for climate finance. He is the UN's Special Envoy on Climate Action and Finance and co-chairs the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, or GFANZ. This is a coalition of the world's biggest banks, insurers, and asset managers, together controlling over $150 trillion. Their stated goal is to steer the global economy towards net zero emissions. On the surface, this sounds fantastic. A financial heavyweight using his influence for the good of the planet. But many environmental groups and analysts are deeply skeptical. Many of its member banks continue to be the biggest funders of the fossil fuel industry globally. They argue that Carney is providing cover for these financial giants, allowing them to make grand public pledges about climate action while their core business model remains unchanged. Brookfield is a massive global investment firm with huge stakes in infrastructure and real estate. Carney's role is to lead their funds that invest in the transition to a low-carbon economy. Again, this sounds positive. However, Brookfield itself has faced criticism for its own portfolio, which includes significant investments in fossil fuel infrastructure. This creates an apparent conflict of interest. How can Carney be a credible global leader on climate action while working for a firm that profits from the very industries contributing to the problem? Carney argues that you have to work with these companies to help them transition, that you can't just divest and walk away. But critics say this approach is too slow and allows companies to continue profiting from fossil fuels, under the guise of a gradual transition that may never fully happen. So when we look at the full arc of Mark Carney's career, a pattern emerges. He is a man who operates at the very highest levels of power, comfortable in the boardrooms of both central banks and private equity firms. He has a unique ability to move between the worlds of public service and private finance. His supporters see him as a brilliant pragmatist, a master of the system who uses his insider knowledge to navigate crises and push for change from within. They argue that to change a system as complex as global finance, you need someone who understands it inside and out. They would say his work on climate, for example, is the only realistic way to get capital flowing towards green solutions at the scale that's needed. However, his detractors see a different story. They see a quintessential member of the global elite, a man whose policies have often benefited the financial sector he came from, sometimes at the expense of ordinary people. They point to the Canadian housing bubble, his political maneuvering during Brexit, and his current role in what they call greenwashing as evidence. They argue that he represents a system where the lines between public interest and private profit are blurred, and where true, radical change is always sacrificed for incremental moves that protect the status quo. Is he a public servant who understands the private sector, or a private sector operator wearing the cloak of a public servant? Ultimately, Mark Carney's legacy is complex and will be debated for years. He is undeniably one of the most influential financial figures of our time. But was he a stabilizing force, a visionary leader who guided us through turbulent times? Or was he a manager of the existing system, whose actions ultimately reinforced the power of big finance and delayed the fundamental changes our economies and our planet need? The story is not as simple as the headlines often suggest. It's a story of power, influence, and the gray area between public good and private gain. What do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you found this deep dive interesting, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more content. I'll see you in the next one.